Hello, hello. See everybody coming in. Welcome to our conscious conversations for today. Super excited you guys are here. As you guys start to come in, we love to know where you guys are tuning in from. So feel free to give us a little hello and let us know from what part of the world you are coming in from. Greenland, Switzerland, Columbus, Nelson, hello. Oh my gosh, Scotland, Jerry from Toronto. Yes, Toronto. I'm calling in from Toronto too. Buenos Aires, Toronto, Phoenix, Hamilton, England. Oh my gosh, Illinois, Hungary, New York, Poland. Hi, Thomas. Awesome. California. Oh my gosh, we have a wide range coming through. Germany, Madagascar, Los Angeles. Hello and hugs to you, Saul, from Panama, Mexico City. Amazing. Hello, I see more and more people coming in. Feel free to let us know where you're coming from and say hello in the chat. Hello, hello. We will be, we're just pausing for a little bit to let people come in, and then we will be starting at around 12:05. So yes, hello. We've got some England, amazing. I'm looking for all of our Toronto folks here. See Bliss. Oh my gosh, this is so exciting. Got a Hamilton too. Mark from Texas, hello. And Eric from Phoenix, hello. Linda, Toronto, yes. Hello, hello, hello. Okay. We still have people coming in. Colin, Toronto, hello. And Glenn from Little Creek, Delaware, hello. Glad to have you guys here. Rohan, I used to live in Toronto. Does that help? I mean, I'm glad you know this city. Oh, Peru. Alejandro, hello. And hey, Jack from Mississauga. Ken, you just got back from visiting in Toronto. Oh my gosh, I hope that you got good weather. We just got out of the middle of like a ton of heat followed by rain. So hopefully you got a good mix of weather while you were here. Kate, you're from Calgary, but you're headed into Toronto for a quick trip. Awesome. I think if you come soon, you are headed into summer weather. It's starting to get really nice here. Okay, we've got 160 people with us so far. And we are just spending a little time getting to know where you guys are tuning in from. We have a wide variety. I think we might have every continent. I haven't seen any Australia. So I'm curious if anybody's calling in from New Zealand or Australia. We have a beautiful group of musers that we know are from that part. Hello from Montreal. Hola from Pedro from Mexico. Hello, hello. We've got Daniel from Vancouver and Michael from Vancouver. Awesome. We got another Nadia from Toronto. Hello, Nadia from Toronto. Also Nadia from Toronto. What? Nobody in Antarctica? I know, right? Should we be extending our reach to Antarctica? Good question. Yes, Nadia is a great name. Agreed. And Christoph from Germany. Hello. We had a couple other fellow Germans above. That's very awesome. And Daniel, I missed you from Chile there. Hello. All right. Anyone from Narnia? Well, you know, today we're basically going to be talking about this surreal innovation future. So maybe Narnia exists somewhere within the lines of that. That's funny. Okay. I think we are about to hand it over for some housekeeping and intros. But this has been exciting. seeing where everybody is from. And throughout this session, we are going to have some polls and some interactive elements. So I love that you guys are already in the chat, and would love to have you guys engaging with the polls once we have them available. But all right, David, I think I'm going to hand it over to you to get us started.
Thanks so much, Nadia, and welcome everyone to today's Conscious Conversation. Thank you so much for joining. We'll be beginning shortly, but before we get started, I'd like to run through some housekeeping. So as usual, we are going to be recording today's session. If you'd like to share the webinar or listen again, we'll be sending you the recording in our follow-up email and sharing it on our YouTube channel. And I'll make sure to send the link in chat so you can subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. Today's session will run for about an hour, with the last portion dedicated to a Q&A with Nadia and our three speakers. Now, currently everyone is in listen-only mode, but we found that these sessions are most engaging when they're interactive. So that's why we encourage you to use the chat as you have been so far, and the Q&A functions that you'll use at the bottom of your screen. Like last time, we'll be incorporating some of your live questions into the discussion. So if you want to help drive the conversation, please submit questions for Nadia to ask the speakers via the Q&A box. And we'll also have some time at the end of the session for a dedicated Q&A with our guests. Just a reminder, the chat function is for you to share your thoughts and answers to our questions. All you have to do is click the chat button and you'll see a blue drop-down menu that says to panelists. Make sure to change it to everyone so that everyone can see your message. And if you have to leave early or before the session ends, not to worry, we'll be addressing all questions you submitted in a follow-up to this webinar. So I'd like to now kick this off by throwing it back to our host, Nadia, who will get us started talking about the future of neurotechnology innovation. Nadia, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Okay, as I mentioned, guys, we are so excited that you are joining us today. It is our 6th Muse virtual event and Conscious Conversations. These have been so engaging for us to be able to have an open dialogue with you guys and to discuss some of our favorite topics. And today I'm particularly excited about. Today we are talking about the frontier of neuro innovations and really getting into exploring the future of brain technology with Muse. So a little introduction. My name's Nadia. I am currently the VP of Marketing here at Muse. I'm also a naturopathic doctor, prior national level competitive swimmer for 18 years of my life, as well as a 2-time wellness startup co-founder. So I have been with Muse for about 5 years now, and I'm also super excited to introduce our panelists in a little bit. But today, just so that we're all on the same page, as mentioned, we'll be exploring how innovation in neurotechnology and research in areas like AR and VR, AI, telehealth, and big data are changing how we understand our own brains and impact the future. So now more than ever, we have the power to change our brain for the better. And a large reason that we're able to do so is because of innovations in technology. And for many of you, I am assuming many of you are musers and own a Muse of your own, which means that you are already using technology to improve your mental health and wellness. I am curious in the chat if any of you are using any other types of products or technology to support your brain health. Don't be shy. Feel free to let us know any other wearables or applications or anything that you're using. Always lots of excitement there. Oura Ring. Yes, I have an Oura Ring as well. Love it. No way Muse rocks. Thanks, Keith. Yes, Sense8. Awesome. Whoa, cool. Okay, yes. Lots of wearable fans out there. Lots of love for Oura. Oh, Apollo Neuro. Awesome. Yes, I have seen their tech as well. Cool. Love that you guys are putting in there. Awesome. Okay. So, I mean, one of the things that is also really exciting and what makes these types of products so interesting, and especially Muse, is the technology platforms that are baked into them. For example, for those who know Muse or don't, the Muse system is also something called a brain-computer interface, which really means that this is a direct communication pathway between the brain's electrical activity and an external device like your mobile phone, aka the Muse app. So that's considered a BCI. And I think the key here, and something that we want to stay focused on, is Muse and Muse technology helps us understand ourselves better. So it creates an opportunity for us to learn about intangible things like our brain activity, to be able to make tangible improvements to our lives and our health. So, I mean, there's a lot of technology out there that exists, but we're really interested in technology, not just for technology's sake or just for the sake that it's cool, though we do love just cool tech. We are looking for technology that is effective and has an impact. And so luckily we have 3 guests today that are going to shed a lot of light on the topics that I mentioned, as well as a sneak peek of some of the ways Muse and Muse research is helping to support intervention in this space. So with that, I would love to introduce you to our 3 panelist guests today, starting with Walter. So Dr. Walter Greenleaf is a neuroscientist, medical technology developer, and lucky for us, Muse's chief science officer. With over 3 decades of research and development experience, Walter is considered a leading authority in the field of digital medicine and medical virtual reality technology. Today, he leads the development of clinical virtual reality products as a visiting scholar at the Virtual Human Intersection Lab at Stanford, focusing on major human health problems like post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, traumatic brain injuries, and more. So not to embarrass him too much, but you all should know that Walter is known by many in this space as the godfather of therapeutic virtual reality. Welcome, Walter.
I'm still trying to go for Yoda instead of Godfather, but here we are. It's exciting to be here with you.
Awesome. Very happy to have you. Next, we have Chris Amity. Oh, what can I say about Chris that can fit into a small blurb? It's challenging, but on top of being a Muse co-founder and current CTO, Chris is a very, very talented artist, spiritualist, musician, and prolific inventor with multiple patents and inventions to his name. He is also a multi-talented engineer, having worked with Dr. Steve Mann, the inventor of the wearable computer, to build what was effectively Google Glass before Google. It's safe to say Chris is truly one of the geniuses behind Muse, the brain sensing headband. Hello, Chris.
Hello.
Hello.
It's so awkward hearing so many great things about oneself.
Just take it in, your accomplishments. Also, fun fact, as we've been living in a remote world, it is always fun for our team to see where Chris is calling from. So right now, we're not sure if he is in a spaceship, a geodesic dome, or who knows, maybe Narnia. So we'll ask him where he is later. And last but certainly not least, I want to welcome Hubert. Hubert is a research scientist at Muse, where he focuses on applying artificial intelligence to extract insights from EEG and biosignals, which is very exciting. His academic background is in biomedical engineering, where he has previously conducted research on functional neuroimaging and hybrid brain-computer interfaces. I'm looking forward to diving into Hubert's work at Muse, where he's developing novel machine learning algorithms to explore our library of brain data. Great seeing you, Hubert.
Happy to be here, Nadia.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, and now the fun begins. It's also fun because this is one of the first conscious conversations where we've had an all Muse panelist team, which kind of makes this conversation a little bit more interesting and casual. The goal here for you guys is, as we're having this discussion, again, we will be looking at the chat for questions that come up and trying to pull them in as we can and as the discussion progresses. So to kick it off, I would love to start with Walter. I think starting with our own technology and with what we have with Muse right now, I'd love to get your sense on, how do the capabilities of a commercial mobile EEG device like Muse compare to other large-scale research-grade EEG systems?
Well, it's a good question, and I'm so excited to see all the progress. Largely, I think by both technical improvements to the sensors and batteries, et cetera, but also to the analytic capacity, where we can now take what was a very complex, uncomfortable, difficult to set up way of collecting EEG data and have basically a mobile system that allows us to do incredible analytics, incredible decision making, give feedback to the user, moving into systems like the Muse and others that are mobile. It just has opened up the door to both better feedback systems like we use for the Muse, but also better ways of collecting research data. So it's really a next evolution of the technology, and it's hard to imagine in my mind, at least, going back to when we used to have to use toothpaste and other gooey stuff to attach electrodes to the skull with a big harness. There's still applications for research where that's really important, but I think we've pushed way beyond that now.
Yeah, I'm bringing to mind, I'm not sure if any of you guys are aware of what traditional older EEG systems looked like and how much space they took up and how much limitation they created on in-field research applications. Chris, I'm sure you can speak a little bit on, what we've actually been able to do by taking, well, first of all, maybe you can describe to them a little bit about what those full systems used to look like and how Muse has kind of created this new opportunity.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest difference we see between Muse or a system like Muse and what we might call a clinical or research EEG. The first thing you notice is the research equipment is quite elaborate. It tends to cover the entire head and has many electrodes that have to somehow make electrical connection with the scalp, which is where the toothpaste-like materials come in, because there's a fluidic coupling between those electrodes and the skin. And generally there's like a computer system, that's connected to it via like a whole bunch of wires. And so it's really quite an elaborate setup. Something that's happening in the field of research EEG is the miniaturization of those systems. And so we tend to see setups now that are more contained, and so you don't necessarily have all like the large assemblage of supporting equipment, but you still have many electrodes on the scalp. And I think the easiest way to understand how that is, the advantage of that or the purpose of that with respect to something that's not so complicated like Muse is, if you're interested in studying the brain anatomy and the function of the brain anatomy, it's really important to know where signals or electrical potentials are originating from in the brain. And so the advantage of having many sensors on the head is you're able to, in some way, triangulate the location in the brain of certain events happening. And so if you're really interested in the anatomical study of the brain, that's super important. So, with Muse, we've taken a much different approach to this. And, there's so many benefits to a neurotechnology that is accessible if we have something which is easy to wear, comfortable, not complicated, doesn't require, elaborate ways of getting through a user's hair to pick up the brain signals. So we really have, optimized what we do to really maximize that like comfort and signal quality from those smaller number of sensors. And if we're not specifically trying to decode the anatomical functions of the brain, and we're rather focusing on use of this where we just look at the brain signal in general to try to infer what's happening and how to give useful feedback to someone or tell them something about what's happening with their brain state. We can get the benefit of what I would say we can get the benefit of. Okay, let me take this another way. In the brain, the whole skull and brain material is all conductive, and so when you have signals somewhere, they propagate to sensors wherever they live on the scalp. And so it's not like you're necessarily losing things, by not having sensors, but they all get blended together. And so even though the where becomes difficult to ascertain, if you're looking at the overall function, and less about where things are happening, you can still get that same information and benefit. And so that's the way we've gone with this, since we see the tremendous benefit in that for people and its accessibility, with that simplification.
Yes, you are bringing up many things to mind as far as removing barriers. I think many of you will agree the brain has been a very mysterious organ and one of the most difficult organs to conduct new types of research on. And as you mentioned, simply the technology to be able to explore it and the mobility of that and accuracy of that technology were barriers previously in our ability to kind of move forward and gain new types of research opportunities. Hubert or Walter, I'm curious, when we're thinking about other barriers to moving forward with neuroscience research, is there anything else notable that you're thinking was previously overcome or that we're currently going through as we're kind of continuing to move forward with understanding the brain in deeper ways?
Well, one thing I can say, and also just again, talking about Muse, I think one of the biggest challenges about neuroscience research and neurotechnology in general, well, the research that has been done already, is that it was mostly confined to labs. And the kind of data that you can collect in labs is very different from the data that you'd collect in the real world. So in labs, you have a very controlled environment. If we think about studying the brain while we sleep, while sleeping in the sleep lab is very, very different from sleeping at your house, in your own bed, in your typical environment. And having a device like the Muse that can be that can be fitted very quickly, that can be used in any context, or almost, makes it a lot easier to collect real world EEG. So having much more diverse sources of EEG, but also data that reflects more closely what happens to the brain in a real life context.
I think the other evolution has been we're getting better at understanding how to take information about ourselves and our brain in particular for this specific conversation, to use it in a context to help change ourselves, to give us the right sort of feedback in the right context. Now, sometimes we've learned from our friends in the gaming and entertainment industries how to build a narrative story into a system that keeps us engaged. We've also learned that there's different styles of learning, different styles of adherence that bring people back to work on something. And we've also learned more about what people are interested in doing to help improve their health and wellness and capacity. So hand in hand with evolutions of the sensing technology, the evolution of the analytical technology is just more exciting stuff to use this to give feedback to ourselves and to improve ourselves. But also I think science has really benefited by having the evolution of citizen scientists, like the people who are with us now, who can give us feedback, help us collect information, help us improve the products, and help us do research. So really, there's been changes outside of the technology that has contributed to some of the amazing things we can do now.
Citizen scientist. I love that term. I have not heard that term before. And that is actually such an important part of the Muse feedback ecosystem, Walter, is being able to use our Muse community to be able to understand and gain insights to further research by having real world out in the field, out of the lab insights, as Hubert mentioned, which is a massive opportunity for research, which is amazing. I am curious, kind of coming off of, all right, we talked a little bit about some of the barriers that have existed. And I mean, there are still barriers that we know right now exist as we continue to move forward. But when we're thinking about particular markets or segments or populations or opportunities, Walter, maybe I'll start with you. Are you seeing particular areas or populations that are specifically ripe with opportunity for new research or interventions using BCIs?
Well, of course, what I find most exciting, and I think many people here will be, is not just helping us learn more about ourselves, but being able to address some very serious healthcare issues such as anxiety, depression, recovery from stroke, working as a disability interface to help people who might have an impairment interact with their environment. We can extend that basic concept of getting information about our brain function and using it to interact with the world or interact with each other. I think it's becoming incredibly exciting as we explore where to apply these different areas. And I'm always amazed when we often get feedback from our users who are, saying, I'd like to use the product this way, and are reaching out to us asking, can we work with you to explore a new area of clinical care, a new area of health and wellness? So it's a tool that people are applying to address a variety of problems. And in terms of what I'm most excited about, I think it's more in the field of stroke rehabilitation, neurorehabilitation. I think there's a lot of great possibilities there. And then also helping people who've had a stroke be aware of, sometimes you're conscious that it might be hard to go to sleep at night if you're worried about having another stroke. So there are some groups out there that are adapting the Muse technology as a way of detecting if you've had another stroke or if you're at risk for another stroke. But there's other areas too, such as looking at Alzheimer's disease and how we can collect some basic data that might help us understand those people who are at risk of converting from mild cognitive impairment over to a neurodegenerative disease. The list goes on. There's so much to be excited about.
That's a great starting place. And I mean, Chris and Hubert, I'll pass it over to you guys as well. Are there particular areas of focus or disease states or populations that you are personally really excited about seeing how innovation in neurotechnology can support either learning more about and solutioning some of those issues?
Here's what Hubert has to say.
Well, what I'd say is not very specific to a specific kind of population. It's more general, but I think it's really one major benefit of portable neurotechnology is longitudinal tracking, right? Essentially, we have this ability now of monitoring someone's brain health over very long periods of time, every day, for instance. And this makes for very exciting research where we can see at a very fine grain level how the brain evolves. And we can also get a good idea, kind of a baseline of how someone's brain works, for instance, and then see after some kind of event or after some kind of intervention, or maybe just after some time, a few years, how the brain changed. And yeah, this is very exciting. And I think it's one thing that we're moving towards more and more with portable neurotechnology.
I mean, it is relevant to all of us, the aging brain, as we every day are not getting younger. However, I guess there's fun ways to talk about, and maybe we can talk about that a little later when we revisit this idea of, longitudinal changes in brain health, how you have the ability to impact your own current brain health. Chris, any other thoughts on specific populations or pathologies that you're interested in?
Yeah, I feel like I also want to make a general statement, and and that is, in so many ways, everything comes back to the brain. That really is at the center of, how as human beings, be it like, how we perform cognitively, which is maybe the obvious connection, but I think also how we feel. It really is rooted in, how we orient to our experience and what our behaviors are. And, be it something like anxiety, depression, or, PTSD, or it could be something which feels more cognitive, like ADHD. These are, symptoms that we see when, things get really out of balance. But also, for any one of us who may not, fit into, one of these, sort of pathology classes, where things haven't gone to, an extreme. Basically, just the process of trying to be the best version of yourself and to move through life, in a state where you're emotionally balanced and happy. That's something that we all face. And it really is something that's based in our brain and behavior. And I think that the what's interesting is we know for certain that we can radically change all these things if we have the right kind of training that is appropriate to us. And it's not easy. We're all so unique, and trying to recognize our patterns and to discover ways of re-engineering those patterns, is something that has, been we've been working on this over, countless years. And I think one dimension of that are the practices of meditation. This is a technology, a way of re-engineering human perception and behavior that really works. We've been developing it for thousands of years, but the outcome of it, if you can do it properly, is really profound. And so I think neurotechnology really does have a great potential to help us with like all these kinds of like re-engineering that we can do, within, this matrix. And the beauty of it is, it can measure things that we aren't necessarily conscious of, or we can measure things that happen, more quickly than and earlier than our consciousness perceives. And so when it comes to discovering patterns and re-engineering them, it gives us like a really serious new tool to do that in a profound way.
And Chris, I just wanted to interject and say that one of the things that you just inspired me to contemplate about is that I don't think we'll understand fully the power of some of the value of meditation until a decade or so from now, because the effects, I think, are both subtle and profound. Just like we may not understand the full value of taking a statin to help with some cardiac problems until we've had time to do the research and long-term analytics to see where things have dramatically changed. I think the same thing with using technology like the Muse and mindfulness and meditation, I won't be surprised if 10, 15 years from now, we see that those people who engage in those practices have significantly different levels of cognitive engagement, of happiness, and some other parameters that are subtle, but after a while be able to pick up the changes and the value of doing this over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just looping back to the last thing we were discussing in terms of, the value of technologies like Muse and its ability to be scalable. I think, it's important for us to recognize how unique every human is. And when we start talking about, at the level of our behaviors in life and our patterns, we're dealing with enormous complexity. And if we imagine the problem of creating a technology that can interpret that and give helpful feedback that's really tuned to the individual, so it really is unique to you, that demands an unprecedented, complexity in the techniques, and we might call them algorithms, because what we do is based in a computer, but to have that specificity is going to take an enormous amount of information from so many unique people, so we can have something which is actually has the capacity to treat each person uniquely rather than trying to treat everybody the same way. And I say that's the big innovation that's happened with neurotech and things like neurofeedback is we used to have techniques that was really like one way of treating everybody. It's like there was no way that the methods could have the expressivity to be unique to an individual. And I think probably we'll talk a little bit about AI in this conversation, but that what that really offers us is specificity down to the individual level, because we can now have methods like numerical methods and algorithms that have the dimensionality, the expressivity that can really provide that unique feedback that this one person needs, as opposed to treating everybody the same way.
And that's an excellent segue. It's almost as though you have moved us in the direction that we wanted to go, Chris.
Oh, good.
AI is a perfect next segue to talk a little bit about what does that mean? Like, what does it mean in a sense of using Muse and EEG data to support AI? And then how does that have an impact, especially at the intersection of kind of wellness and performance? What are we seeing there, and really how are we seeing this move forward? And this is open question, but Chris, I know you're go ahead, Walter.
Well, I was going to say there's some amazing examples of how the concept of precision medicine is being applied. Here at Stanford University, we have a program on clinical care that's the Stanford Center on Precision Mental Health and Wellness. And a big part of that is collecting information such as the type of data we get with the Muse, along with everything else, your history, your blood values, your brain imaging, and coming up with something that is not a one-size-fits-all, but a specific approach for the individual. And I think that concept is promulgating throughout clinical care. It's really how we should have always been. It's just we haven't had the tools to do that until recently, and it's making a big difference to have our therapies, our clinical care, and our health and wellness pathways be adjusted to our preferences and with our specific goals in mind too. And that, I think that's a key thing that's really evolved relatively recently, is baking into our clinical protocols an understanding of what the goals of the user or the patient are.
Absolutely. And this idea of personalized care from a therapeutic level has a really major impact on the effectiveness of a treatment, right? And I think we're also talking a little bit about how we help accelerate human learning and human responses through AI and personalized interventions using AI. Chris, I knew you were kind of leading into something. Was there another point you wanted to bring up along that line?
I think it's past now. I'd love to
Okay.
hear a bit from Hubert, since he really has a deep expertise in the AI field.
And could be a good segue to Hubert, talking about some of the previous and really exciting research that you've been doing with training algorithms using self-supervised learning and reinforcement learning, which may not mean a lot to the audience. So I'm curious if you can just walk us through a little bit on, one, picking up with your personal interest in AI and our technology, and two, some of the applications and explaining some of that previous research you just discovered.
Yeah, of course. I think one incredible benefit of having portable devices like Muse, is that we can collect very diverse data sets of data that span a very large population, which is something that was not necessarily possible in a pure academic setting, right? Where often research studies will focus on smaller sample sizes, so just a few tens, maybe a few hundreds of people. But with these kinds of portable devices, again, we can end up with very, very large data sets. And one big challenge is with making use of this kind of data set is that they're not collected in the typical controlled environment where we know exactly what the person was doing while the data was being collected. And so we have this weird problem where we actually have a lot of data, but very few labels, in the sense that we don't necessarily know what each recording maps to. We don't necessarily know what the person was doing or what maybe the medical history of that person was. And so from the perspective of machine learning, where we want to train algorithms, computer algorithms to learn from the data, we want to teach them to be able to, for instance, recognize the activity that someone was doing while their data was being recorded, or maybe predict health outcome from their data. This setting where we have a lot of data but few labels makes it very hard to apply traditional machine learning techniques, where we typically require these kinds of labels. So we need to know, we need to tell the algorithm, the computer, here's an example of someone's EEG data, and here's what they're doing, or here's how they're doing. And then later on in the future, once the computer has been taught, we could present new data to the computer, and we would expect it to be able to recognize what was happening in the data. And so that's where my work in self-supervised learning came from. So how can we make use of these large data sets with few labels? And the idea behind self-supervised learning is actually pretty simple. It's based on the fact that as humans, as EEG experts, for instance, we do have some understanding of the data we're dealing with. So EEG data, for instance, is what we call a time series. So we collect data for a couple of minutes, maybe up to a few hours. And if you've looked at EEG data, for instance, during sleep, so if someone's sleeping and you're collecting their EEG data, you would see that the EEG data that is closer in time, so maybe you look at the EEG data right now in a few seconds, or maybe up to 2-3 minutes, usually looks pretty similar. But if you look at EEG data right now and compare it to EEG data in a couple of hours during the night, it might look very different because maybe the person is a different sleep stage, or there's something else that's happening. And so my work in self-supervised learning just leverage this understanding that we have. And instead of teaching the computer by directly telling it what it's looking at, we're teaching the computer to predict whether two examples of EEG data, so maybe a 30-second window of EEG data, was close in time to another window. And just by doing this, just by learning to predict whether two of these windows are close in time, we've seen that the deep learning algorithms we train could learn a lot about the EEG data itself, about the structure of sleep, about age, and on some other kind of recordings, more clinical type recordings, we could also learn information about pathologies and yeah, other dimensions that were not labeled originally in the data.
Very
and
cool.
So, yeah, I would just say that, yeah, this is something very useful for us at Interaxon, and we're very excited about this kind of approach.
Yeah, and speaking about, labeled data, that's novel. One of the things that we were previously talking about was brain age. And I'm wondering if there was a relation to that research paper and work that you did to some of the newest research that we've been talking about and learning about here at Muse. And if you and Chris can talk a little bit about, this concept of brain age. And just a note to everybody who is putting in comments and questions, we are recording those questions and we will be having a Q&A after. So the conversation is kept evolving, and I haven't wanted to break up the fluidity, but we are taking those questions and have them on the side. But there were two last topics that I wanted to go into. One was just really talking about this opportunity to talk about brain age. Why does it matter? What is it? What's Muse doing about it? And then to touch quickly a little bit on VR and biosensing technology in VR. So just back to, coming off of that initial research that you had talked about, Hubert, and also leading a little bit into some of this newest research. Can you talk about what we learned and how they might be linked, and what is brain age?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so brain age is this idea that has been around in the research literature for a couple of years now, and it's a very simple framework. And the idea is, can we teach machine learning algorithms to predict someone's age based on their brain data? And so a lot of this research was originally done using MRI, and more specifically anatomical MRI. So we know a little bit about how the brain structure changes with age, and just using this information, we can kind of try and predict someone's age just by looking at their MRI data. And more recently, we've seen this approach used with functional neuroimaging data. So that's the neuroimaging where we record the function of the brain, so the brain while it's working. And EEG is one example of functional neuroimaging. And so specifically, we've been looking at using machine learning and deep learning algorithms to predict someone's age based on their meditation data, based on their sleep data. And what we've seen is that we can actually translate this kind of more research or academic framework that has been done mostly on clinical data to real world EEG data like Muse. And we can actually predict someone's age with some level of accuracy. Now, why is it important?
I was just going to say,
yes,
before we move on, quick pause and a poll for the audience. So what we're talking right now is being able to use a tool like Muse to make an estimate or a prediction on your brain age. I'm curious to hear from the audience, how valuable would knowing your estimated brain age be to you if you could have it calculated using a device like Muse? So very valuable, neutral, not that useful, and I don't know. And while that's going, please continue, Hubert. Sorry to interrupt you.
So yeah, I just wanted to say that the whole point of this is that your chronological age, so your actual age that you have, for instance, by looking at your passport, what we call your passport age also sometimes, is not the whole story. You might be older, but you're actually in very good shape. You have very good health. And so actually maybe your body looks younger, and the opposite can be the case too. Maybe you're quite young, but you're in bad shape and bad health, and your brain looks older. And that's the whole point of brain age. just using your EEG data, we can try and guess how old you are. And so if you look older than you actually are, then it might mean that you have poorer brain health, and the opposite can be true as well.
So it's not the years, it's the mileage.
Not the years, it's the mileage, which is very true. And Hubert, you outlined a key portion that, to link us back into the earlier conversation, this idea that everyone is unique, and just by knowing, your passport age, that doesn't really give you a complete picture of someone's health or the opportunities for that individual. And just to show a little on the brain age poll, so we had 35% of people in the very valuable category, 40% in the valuable category, 13% neutral, 7% not that useful, and a 5% I don't know. So we're obviously seeing a lot of interest and perceived value from our listeners right now, that knowing this mileage calculation could be something very valuable as a marker or a potential marker for our health. Now, I say this, but we also know that there's a lot of work to be done. There is a lot of validation to be done, a lot of future research to be done in order to learn more about the impact of these things. And I mean, Walter, I'm curious on your take here.
Well, I think that it really is something that is a useful concept for both research and for personal satisfaction and goals. I think that we need to be very holistic about it, though. And I think that there's our cognitive function. There's also emotions. There's so many aspects of what our brains do for us that it becomes I'm always hesitant about taking something very complex and boiling it down to one or two indications. On the other hand, sometimes that can be really helpful. Again, to extend the automobile analogy, knowing your dashboard, which takes all the information of what's going on in your car, and boiling it down to your speed and whether your temperature of your engine is too hot, that's useful too. So as a scientist, I resist having things being collapsed into one or two scores. But as someone who is trying to develop products that help people improve their health and wellness, I think it's tremendously valuable. And again, going back to gameplay, it's hard to move through a game in advance unless you have some sort of feedback of all the different attributes going on. So I think having a score like this really helps us with promoting adherence to the often difficult process of staying healthy.
Just tagging that, Walter, I think one thing that we found in this research is, you make a measurement, and the next step is trying to understand variations in what that measurement is indicating. And so, for example, like, let's say, you have a brain age that we've measured that is more than your chronological age, or it's less than, or maybe it changes throughout the day, or maybe it changes depending on how much sleep you have, or what's going on in your life emotionally. Like, there's all these sources of variation, and really it creates more questions. So in that spirit of science, I think those questions is actually the threads that we want to follow as we try to get into the nuances of it, because I totally agree with you. Like, there are so many dimensions that that factor into something like this, and so what I love about it is it creates questions that give us that provides that seed for curiosity to go into our own exploration of what am I doing in my life, and how might this be affecting my brain age, or some dimension of brain age that we're able to measure. And so I think this is just one area we're super excited to engage the Muse community in a citizen science exploit because I think that we really need, the voices of the many, and their own, inquisitive curiosity in what's happening for them in their life to try to understand what's going on here, and how can we take something that is very general and start to get into the specifics that can really help us.
I couldn't agree more.
Okay, guys, I'm doing a really bad job at time management. And there's one last thing that I want to ask you guys. So we are going to take 2 minutes. I'm going to ask this to all three of you. Okay, I would like you, and we're moving into the world of VR. This could be a dedicated session in its own right. But if we were to keep it high level, I'm curious what single element of the applications of neurotechnology or biosensor technology integration into VR and AR experiences makes you most excited and gets you excited about.
Well, I brought my prop. I think this technology is evolving so fast, and what we will be using a few years from now is going to be 1,000 times more profound than we're using now. However, as it is now, it's a really powerful way to have an experience. And my colleague, Jeremy Bailenson, has a book titled VR Experience on Demand. And to me, linking what we can measure about ourselves, in particular, what we can measure about our cognitive processes to experiences gives us both new tools to motivate, to engage, to collaborate, to extend, to work together, to study, and to move forward in a way, pursuing things that are often difficult to do. So we can take all the data that we can collect with the Muse technology, take the experiences, which can be focused on mindfulness and relaxation, or they can be more complex, and just closing that feedback loop and driving the experience based on our intentions and our signals, so profound. So it's really a new era. It's just getting started.
It's this level of almost personalization that we were talking about that starts to enter into the fold, which is really interesting. And last poll, while I give Hubert and Chris a moment to collect their thoughts, curious from the audience, do any of you guys currently have a VR headset that you are using or own? Very curious. And while that poll is going, Hubert or Chris, your thoughts and excitement on biosignals / neurotechnology integration into VR or AR applications?
Well, I'd say I don't have much to add from what Walter said, but for me, it's very exciting to have this platform where, you can create a new experience, a new environment, which wouldn't be possible to create in real life, or would be very complicated to create in real life, and still be able to study the brain and the body during that experience.
I think maybe like just a general perspective here. We bring the vast majority of the information that we receive through our eyes. It's like the biggest channel of information that the brain has access to. And so from the standpoint of, trying to, work with the mind in a productive way, for positive change, I think that there is an unbelievable new world that's going to be available to us, through, VR and AR tech. Likewise, I mean, whenever you have, a more potent tool, the dangers are more potent. And so in the same way, I think that our capacity to, really bring ourselves into a place of, poorer health and well-being and happiness, is also magnified with a technology like VR. So I think it's, there's obviously the two edges to it. But I'm super interested in, what we can do with biofeedback and neurofeedback and behavioral change experiences in VR, really with health being the focus. to date, the things that we've worked on, we're focused on have been experiences where it's very natural to not, engage so much in the visual dimension. Meditation is typically practiced with your eyes closed. We sleep with our eyes closed. It's a really inner experience where we're limiting the information that's flowing into the brain. But just, like taking a pause in meditation, once we, have done a lot of practice, inner practice with our eyes closed, the next step is bringing these things out into life. And we move through life with our eyes open, and we need to start engaging in the full bandwidth of human experience and to take our skills into that and to practice. So that's really expanding the field of practice. And so I'm excited at taking that next step, in VR and what we do, because of that dimension of, bringing practice into life, which, certainly it's not a better form. It's a necessary additive form. So I think there's great potential there.
Awesome. Okay, guys, I could talk to you guys forever. And I am sad that we do need to start wrapping. And I will mention, if any of you on this call are a developer or are interested in learning more about Muse's SDK for VR, we do have a sign up page where you can stay up to date on when that's being launched and how we're supporting it with hardware. But okay, I wanted to thank everybody for being here. We are going to do, and I know many of you need to go because we are at time, but we do have a couple extra minutes to go over some questions that came in from the audience. So I think I'm going to be handing this over to David. But again, I just wanted to say one more time, thank you guys all for joining us today. I know this was a pretty in-depth discussion, and we went in a couple different areas that are really exciting. I know I'm excited about it, as well as Muse's place within all of that exciting innovation and research. And a big thank you to Walter, Hubert, and Chris for being here with us, and also being on the Muse team and helping support innovations like this. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And David, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. It was what a great conversation. And of course, because of that, we got a lot of questions in from our attendees. And just so everyone knows, we are going to, there's only so much time we have, and our guests are graciously going to be able to stay over a time a little bit so we can answer some of those questions. But don't worry, if we don't get to your question, we'll be compiling them and sharing them in the community in a follow-up. So I just want to make sure everyone is aware of that. But we do have some questions that we want to get our guests to answer. So we'll start with Jenna's question. The first one is, would Muse ever use the Oculus to set up Muse in the VR world? Excuse me, that was from Edward.
And maybe just for clarity, is it like the Oculus Quest or any of the Oculus devices?
I think Oculus Quest. I don't know if Edward is still here to clarify that, but let's just assume Oculus Quest.
Yeah, so the simple answer is yes. So we have some extensions to our developer tools that allow people to take the Muse and integrate it into applications for Oculus. And so we're working on some of our own, which we're having fun doing. But yeah, I think we can absolutely look forward to an integration where you can use or other Oculus device with your Muse, and just we'll see where that goes.
Very cool. All right, we've got an interesting one from Gavin, very relevant. What do you think of Elon Musk's Neuralink? If anyone wants to take that.
Well, I think just for those who don't know, they're part of what they're doing is working on implanting tech into the brain, and the possibilities that are there with a technology like that are very interesting. I think we're a long way away from knowing really how to do it and to do it safely and for it to be an accessible tech, where, like those of us who are on the call would maybe go in for something like that, like maybe this is too, it's really a question for the next generation. If we're looking at, the broad, dispersal of a tech like that, where really, there are many humans who might have implanted tech. Walter, do you want to say a few things in there?
Sure. I think we already have some amazing input and output systems to our brain. I'm speaking, I'm using my facial expressions, my eye gaze, my non-verbal positioning of my body to communicate to you, and you have amazing systems to interpret what I'm saying and what I'm communicating non-verbally. We also have amazing ways of putting input into our brain. So I think we haven't yet really hit a barrier that we can't get over with existing input and output to our brain. And so I'm not personally feeling the need to go there. And I don't like surgery. So I'm inclined to say let's proceed cautiously with that. Now, with the exception, sometimes when someone has a disability or an impairment where they can't communicate or interact with the world through the usual ways, then something like that could be really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's another example for me of, how do we use technology responsibly? And I mean that just on an individual level. How do I use my computer responsibly? And what I mean by that is, am I moving in a direction of greater health and well-being? And, am I performing better? Am I happier? Am I more connected with people I care about? And I think, as the technology development is going extremely fast, and I don't know if our skill at or our wisdom in how we use things in a helpful way, I don't know if it's moving at the same pace, So I think there, I sort of feel like we're headed in this direction, and there's great benefit that's going to come from it. But I think that there's a lot of big pitfalls that we need to be careful of, and certainly as far as this kind of technology really being a tool for the average person to be able to take advantage of in a positive way, I think we're actually a good many years away from that. But I'm really interested to see how that tech evolves. And I fully agree with you, Walter. I mean, in a way, you can think of all of our senses as being like implanted tech, in our brain, directly wired in, but in such a profoundly beautiful and perfect way, right? And the what we can learn to do through our senses, I think the possibilities are unbelievable, and I think that's really what inspired me, when I started learning about meditation, and I started learning about other kinds of practices we could use to develop our nervous system. That there is so much that's accessible, and we're just scratching the surface.
And we can reprogram our brains too, dynamically. And there's perceptual learning. There's learning. So we have so many ways to optimize what we already have.
Fascinating. Next question from Tamas. How far is Muse from being able to use Muse as a BCI for brain commands like move forward or turn left, close to real time? Is there any AI research going on in that direction?
Well, I can say a few things about that, and I think it ties in pretty nicely with what we're just talking about. Surface EEG, like the kind of technology we use in the Muse headband, while being very safe and easy to use, will not get the same kind of fine-grained information as if you open the skull and put electrodes in. This just means that, especially with a device like the Muse, which has fewer electrodes, and as Chris mentioned earlier during the conversation, this just means that it's harder to know exactly where the information comes from. having active brain-computer interfaces where you use EEG or some kind of neuroimaging to give commands like moving forward, turning left or right if you're controlling a wheelchair is much more difficult. I think there are ways of doing it, and we've worked on some exciting ways at Interaxon using, for instance, something that we call event-related potentials and steady-state evoked potentials to control some kinds of interfaces. But ultimately, I believe these kinds of interfaces will not be as attractive as just using your own motor functions because they're so much more reliable, so much easier and natural to use, unless you're in a case where disability means you cannot use your muscles to communicate. So I'd say it's possible, it's hard, and there might be ways that there might be good use cases, but ultimately, I think moving towards higher density devices or maybe even invasive technology is where we'll really see a gain over what you can do naturally.
Okay, next, and thank you for those answers. Those are two things. We've got a lot of questions, so rest assured we're going to try to answer all the questions. We won't be able to cover them all in this session, but we do try to answer some of the questions afterwards, and this is being recorded for those who do need to drop. But I did want to cover Jenna and Luca, who are budding scientists looking for resources to ask our current scientists. So Jenna asked, social scientist learning to read EEGs here. Any recommendations for learning resources?
Well, one thing I can say quickly is there's a very nice network, international network of people interested in neurotechnology and EEG in particular, called Neurotech X. And I've been in Neurotech X, and I've been involved in that community for a little while. And there are groups in a lot of major cities around the world with meetups and hack nights, a very nice Slack community as well. And that's a great way to get introduced to the community and learn more about EEG and other kinds of neurotechnology.
Awesome. Neurotech X, Jenna. And then Luca had asked also, what advice would you give young researchers about the skills needed in a career studying meditational practices and their benefits?
Mm-hmm. I guess my view of that is to go on some retreats. I think there is no substitute for like deep, direct personal experience with it, and the meditation has been around for a long time, and the techniques are quite refined, and the effects are profound. And I think taking yourself to a meditation retreat, if you're really interested in deeply understanding the methodologies and how they function and how they feel and how it changes you, then practicing in retreat is the best way to do that, because you have access to a really skilled teacher, and you also have the environment has been created to support you in going deep into the practice.
Okay. So that was a twist that I wasn't expecting. Coming to terms and creating your own association with a meditation practice in order to support that. But of course, firsthand research, sample size of one.
I think it all depends on where you want to go with your career. And if you're deeply interested in this area and you want to be more of a focused scientist in this area, then there's so many different pathways that this important area overlaps with neuroscience, anthropology, design, game mechanics, leveraging the power of mindfulness and meditation, and either applying it to some of the clinical and health problems that are out there, or going the other way, understanding how health and wellness can be directly indexed and correlated with our behavior. It's such a complex area and such an important area. So really, I would just suggest pursue what pathway grabs you. There'll be a wave that you just have to ride, and pay attention for it.
That's great advice, Walter.
Very good advice. Okay, guys, we are at time. Again, we got amazing questions come in from you guys that we are going to try to get to. I wanted to say one last time, thank you guys so much for joining us today. You in the audience who have joined us from all over the world. We love being able to have sessions like this with you, and we will have another one coming down the pipeline, and we'll also have a recording of this available. And to our panelists, Chris, Hubert, Walter, thank you guys again so much for being with us today. And that's a wrap. Thanks, guys. All right.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day.